Several months had passed since Olivia Carter rebuilt her life. Her new event planning company was thriving, and for the first time in years, she believed the worst was behind her. Then the envelope arrived. Inside was an old photograph of herself and Sophie as teenagers. On the back were 6 unsettling words. "You still don't know the whole truth." The message refused to leave her mind. She read it again and again until something strange caught her attention. The handwriting looked familiar. She could not remember where she had seen it before, but the shape of the letters awakened an uneasy memory. That night sleep became impossible. By morning Olivia made a decision. If there was another truth hidden beneath the betrayal, she needed to find it. She drove across Seattle to Sophie's apartment. The place had been empty for months. Dust covered the furniture, and the silence inside felt almost unnatural. Olivia slowly walked through the rooms, remembering years of friendship that now seemed filled with unanswered questions. As she prepared to leave, something beneath Sophie's bed caught her attention. Small wooden box. Inside were several old newspaper clippings, photographs, and a worn leather journal. Her hands trembled as she opened it. The first pages contained ordinary memories from high school, but then the entries changed. There were dates, names, and references to an incident that had happened when she and Sophie were 16. One sentence stood out immediately. "If Olivia ever learns what happened that night, everything will change." Olivia's heartbeat quickened. Sometimes the people we hate are carrying secrets that could save us. The more she read, the more confused she became. Sophie had been investigating something for years. The affair with Ethan suddenly seemed small compared to whatever secret filled these pages. For the first time, Olivia wondered if she had never truly known her best friend. She turned another page and discovered an envelope hidden inside the journal. It contained an old newspaper article. The paper was yellow with age. At the center of the page was a photograph of a teenage girl standing beside a damaged car. The girl was Olivia, and someone had circled her face with a thick red marker. The old newspaper article stayed in Olivia's hands long after sunrise. She barely remembered the accident mentioned in the story. According to the article, a car had crashed on a rainy highway 15 years earlier. 2 people had died instantly, and several witnesses claimed a young girl had been found near the wreckage. That girl was Olivia. Confused and disturbed, she began researching the incident online. Most of the records were old and incomplete, but one detail immediately caught her attention. The dates did not make sense. The accident had happened only a few weeks before her parents officially adopted her. An uneasy feeling settled inside her. She spent the entire afternoon digging through public archives and eventually found a copy of the police report. According to the report, the victims had never been properly identified. Even stranger, there were no photographs of the bodies. The more she investigated, the more impossible the story became. Then she opened Sophie's journal again. Several pages were dedicated to the accident. Sophie had collected newspaper clippings, handwritten notes, and even maps of the crash site. At the bottom of one page, she had written a sentence that made Olivia's blood run cold. The crash was staged. The dead were never supposed to be found. Olivia stared at the words in disbelief. The tragedy that had shaped her childhood might have been a carefully planned lie. Suddenly, every memory of her family felt uncertain. Who were the people who adopted her? Why had Sophie been investigating this secret? And why had she never told her anything? Desperate for answers, Olivia drove to the house where she had grown up. The place had been empty since her adoptive parents passed away. Inside the attic, she found several old boxes filled with family documents and photographs. For hours she searched through papers, tax records, and faded letters. Then she discovered a hidden envelope taped beneath a drawer. Inside were legal documents she had never seen before. There was an adoption certificate, medical records, and one final document. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. It was a birth certificate, but the name written at the top was not Olivia Carter. It belonged to a little girl with an entirely different last name. The unfamiliar name on the birth certificate refused to make sense. Olivia read the document again and again, hoping she had misunderstood it. But every line confirmed the same impossible truth. She had been adopted. The people she had called mom and dad for nearly her entire life were not her biological parents. Beneath the certificate lay another envelope. Inside were adoption papers dated only weeks after the mysterious car accident. Attached to them was a short note written in her adoptive mother's handwriting. "Protect her until the truth is safe." The words sent a chill through her. Who needed protection? And from whom? As she searched through the remaining papers, she discovered several old photographs hidden between the pages of a family album. The pictures showed something she had never seen before. Her adoptive parents were standing beside another couple. A young man with dark hair and a smiling woman held a little girl in their arms. That little girl was Olivia. On the back of one photograph were 4 faded words. "Together before everything changed." Tears filled her eyes. Her biological parents had existed. They had loved her. And then they had vanished. According to the documents, they disappeared shortly after the accident. Nothing in her life suddenly felt real anymore. Her memories, even her childhood. Everything seemed built on secrets. Then she remembered Sophie. The journal. The newspaper clippings. The investigation. Sophie had known. For years she had carried this truth alone. The woman Olivia had called her enemy might have spent all those years trying to protect her. The realization was almost unbearable. Perhaps the betrayal had never been as simple as it seemed. Perhaps Sophie had been afraid of something far bigger than losing a friendship. Determined to find answers, Olivia grabbed the photographs and drove across the city. She needed to find Sophie immediately. By evening she arrived outside Sophie's apartment building. The hallway was dark and strangely quiet. She knocked on the door. No answer. She knocked again. Nothing. Finally, the building manager approached and looked at her with concern. He explained that Sophie had moved out several days earlier. No forwarding address. No explanation. No one had seen her since. Olivia slowly opened the unlocked apartment door. The rooms were empty. The closets had been cleared. The photographs were gone. It looked as though Sophie had vanished in the middle of the night. And there wasn't a single clue telling Olivia where she had gone. The empty apartment left Olivia with more questions than answers. She searched every corner of the place, hoping Sophie had left behind something that could explain her disappearance. First, there seemed to be nothing. Then she noticed a small piece of paper trapped beneath a kitchen cabinet. It was a receipt from a downtown cafe. On the back, someone had written a name. Daniel Mercer. After a few hours of searching online, Olivia discovered that Daniel Mercer had once been one of Seattle's most respected investigative journalists. He had retired years earlier after exposing several corruption scandals. The next morning, she found him living alone in a small house outside the city. The old man seemed unsurprised to see her, as if he had been expecting her. When Olivia mentioned Sophie's name, a shadow crossed his face. He admitted that Sophie had visited him many times over the past 2 years. She had been investigating a secret that terrified her. Then Daniel said something that made Olivia's heart stop. Powerful people had been watching her long before she ever met Ethan. Her photographs, school records, and even details of her childhood had been collected by unknown individuals. Someone had been following her entire life. The truth behind betrayal was far more dangerous than betrayal itself. Daniel finally mentioned a name that appeared repeatedly in Sophie's notes. Richard Hale. To the public, Richard was a wealthy businessman and generous philanthropist who donated millions to charities and children's hospitals. But according to Sophie, he was connected to something much darker. She believed he controlled a hidden network of corruption involving politicians, business leaders, and influential families. More importantly, she believed this network was somehow connected to Olivia's biological parents. Daniel handed her a folder. Inside were copies of newspaper articles, photographs, and financial records. Sophie had been dangerously close to exposing something enormous. And then she disappeared. A sudden fear settled over Olivia. If Sophie had uncovered the truth, someone might have silenced her. As evening approached, she hurried back to Sophie's apartment, hoping she had missed something important. But the moment she stepped into the hallway, she froze. The apartment door was hanging open. Inside, everything had been destroyed. Furniture had been overturned. Drawers had been emptied. Photographs and papers covered the floor. Someone had searched the apartment. And they had arrived before Olivia did. The destruction inside Sophie's apartment was no accident. Someone had been searching for something. Olivia carefully stepped over broken glass and scattered papers until she noticed a photograph lying beneath an overturned chair. It showed Sophie standing beside Daniel Mercer outside a library. On the back, Sophie had written 3 words. "Ask him everything." An hour later, Olivia was sitting once again in Daniel's small living room. This time the old journalist looked defeated. He seemed to understand that there was no longer any reason to hide the truth. After a long silence, he finally spoke. Years ago, while investigating political corruption, he had discovered evidence of a secret organization known as the Crimson Circle. Officially, the group did not exist. Unofficially, it controlled powerful families, politicians, judges, and major businesses across the country. Its members operated from the shadows, protecting one another and eliminating anyone who threatened their secrets. Daniel had spent decades collecting evidence against them. Then he discovered 2 names connected to the organization. Olivia's biological parents. According to his investigation, they had once worked closely with people inside the circle before uncovering its criminal activities. Horrified by what they learned, they decided to expose the organization. Few weeks later, they disappeared. No bodies were ever found. No official investigation followed. It was as though they had simply vanished from the world. The enemy was never her best friend. It was an empire hiding in plain sight. Olivia felt the room begin to spin. Her entire life suddenly made sense. The mysterious accident, the secret adoption, Sophie's years of investigation, even the betrayal that had destroyed her engagement. Everything connected back to one terrifying truth. She had never been an ordinary woman. She had been a target. Her biological parents had tried to expose dangerous people, and someone had spent years making sure their daughter never discovered what happened. Daniel handed her one final file. Inside were photographs of powerful men and women attending secret meetings. One face appeared again and again: Richard Hale. The respected businessman was deeply connected to the Crimson Circle. Before Olivia could ask another question, her phone suddenly vibrated. An unknown number had sent her a message. Her hands trembled as she opened it. There were only 2 words on the screen. "Trust no one." The message had been sent from Sophie's phone. The message from Sophie's phone included a location: a small coastal town nearly 3 hours from Seattle. Ignoring Daniel's warnings, Olivia drove through the night, unable to think about anything except the possibility that Sophie was still alive. By sunrise, she arrived at an old apartment building overlooking the harbor. On the 3rd floor, one of the doors slowly opened. Sophie stood there. She looked exhausted, as though she had not slept in days. For several seconds, neither woman moved. Months of anger, betrayal, and unanswered questions hung heavily between them. Finally, Olivia stepped inside. The apartment was filled with newspapers, photographs, and documents connected to the Crimson Circle. Sophie had never stopped investigating. Tears filled her eyes as she explained everything. Years earlier, she had accidentally discovered that Olivia's biological parents were connected to a powerful secret organization. The deeper she looked, the more dangerous the truth became. Then people began following her. Threatening messages appeared. Unknown cars parked outside her home. Someone wanted the investigation to end. Sophie became convinced that anyone close to Olivia would eventually be used against her. So she made a terrible decision. She pushed Olivia away. The affair with Ethan had been partly staged to make Olivia hate them and leave Seattle forever. The betrayal that destroyed her life may have been an act of protection. Olivia could barely breathe. Every painful memory suddenly looked different. Then another shock followed. Ethan had secretly been helping Sophie investigate the Crimson Circle. He had used his business connections to gather information and protect Olivia from a distance. The man she believed had destroyed her future had actually been trying to save it. But understanding the truth did not erase the pain. Olivia thought about her broken engagement, the humiliation, and the lonely months that followed. Forgiveness did not come easily. She looked at Sophie and realized that fear had driven every terrible decision. Neither of them had been villains. They had simply been trapped inside a dangerous secret. As the morning passed, the three of them began comparing evidence. For the first time, they felt close to understanding what had happened to Olivia's parents. Then a sudden noise came from outside. Car door slammed. Then another. Sophie walked toward the window and immediately froze. Several black vehicles had stopped in front of the building. Men wearing dark suits were stepping out, one after another. More vehicles appeared at the back entrance. The building was completely surrounded. Slowly, Sophie turned toward Olivia. There was fear in her eyes. Someone had found them. The men outside moved with terrifying precision. Within seconds, the front entrance of the apartment building was forced open. Sophie quickly led Olivia and Ethan toward a back room where a hidden staircase connected to the neighboring building. Before they could escape, a familiar voice echoed through the hallway. Richard Hale had arrived. The wealthy businessman stepped into the apartment with calm confidence, as though he had expected this moment for years. To Olivia's surprise, he ordered his men to lower their weapons. Then he revealed a truth she never imagined. He had known her biological parents personally. Years ago, he had worked alongside them while secretly gathering evidence against the Crimson Circle. When they discovered that the organization planned to eliminate them, they entrusted Richard with one final mission: protect their daughter. For years, he had remained close enough to watch over Olivia while hiding his true identity. But there was another secret. Before disappearing, her parents had hidden documents capable of exposing every powerful member of the Crimson Circle. And according to those documents, the only person who could legally access the evidence was Olivia. The woman who had lost everything was actually the key to destroying a powerful criminal empire. The revelation left her speechless. Suddenly, gunfire erupted outside. Another group of armed men stormed the building. Richard's expression darkened. These men did not work for him. They belonged to the true leader of the Crimson Circle. Chaos exploded through the apartment. Windows shattered. Furniture overturned. People ran in every direction. Richard handed Olivia a small flash drive. It contained the evidence her parents had died protecting. He ordered her to escape before the circle could take it. As Olivia and Ethan moved toward the hidden staircase, Sophie suddenly stopped. Someone had to delay the attackers. Without hesitation, she locked the hallway door behind them and stayed behind. Olivia screamed for her, but Sophie refused to move. For the first time in years, her former best friend looked completely at peace. She was willing to sacrifice herself to save the person she had spent years trying to protect. Tears filled Olivia's eyes as Ethan pulled her toward the exit. Minutes later, they escaped through the neighboring building and disappeared into the crowded streets. Then Olivia's phone vibrated. A new message had arrived from an unknown number. Attached was a photograph of Sophie. She was tied to a chair inside a dark room. Beneath the image was a single sentence: "If you want your friend alive, come alone." The message gave Olivia an address on the outskirts of Seattle. An abandoned warehouse stood alone beside the river. Clutching the flash drive that contained the evidence against the Crimson Circle, she entered the building with Ethan close behind. Inside, she finally came face to face with a man who had spent decades hiding in the shadows. The leader of the Crimson Circle was Senator Marcus Whitmore, one of the country's most respected political figures. For years, he had built his reputation on honesty while secretly controlling an empire of corruption. Sophie was tied to a chair beside him. Marcus demanded the flash drive. Instead, Olivia secretly sent copies of the evidence to Daniel Mercer and several federal investigators. Within minutes, police vehicles surrounded the warehouse. Chaos erupted. Members of the circle attempted to escape, but there was nowhere left to run. Sophie was rescued, and Senator Whitmore was finally arrested alongside the surviving members of the organization. The empire that had destroyed countless lives collapsed in a single night. Sometimes forgiveness reveals truths that hatred can never uncover. As the investigation ended, Ethan publicly admitted his mistakes. He apologized for his role in the deception and accepted responsibility for the pain he had caused. A few weeks later, he left Seattle to begin a new life elsewhere. For the first time, there was no anger between him and Olivia, only closure. During the following months, Olivia discovered that one of her biological mother's cousins was still alive. Meeting the remaining members of her biological family answered questions she had carried her entire life. She finally understood where she came from. More importantly, she learned that she had been loved from the very beginning. Her friendship with Sophie did not heal overnight. Trust takes time to rebuild. But slowly, the two women began finding their way back to each other. They shared old memories, spoke honestly about their mistakes, and started creating new ones. The friendship that betrayal had nearly destroyed refused to die. Months later, Olivia closed her office one evening and prepared to head home. As she reached her desk, she noticed a small package waiting for her. There was no name, no return address. Inside was an old photograph of her biological parents standing beside an unfamiliar man. She turned the photograph over. Written on the back were 7 chilling words. The circle was only the beginning of the story.